Welcome to part 2 for the review for our course. And we've already used part 1, which is where we made our models for the player, position, and team. And we added annotations for the player. And we didn't do it for position or teams, but you could go ahead and do that, which would help us on our scaffolding. And you'll see that when we start to scaffold the difference of what an annotation would do. So let's go ahead and continue. Now that we made our models and we've made sure that we did a build on them, let's go ahead and continue on, and let's create a brand new controller. So right mouse click on controller, and I just want you to see something. What I want you to see is that if you realize we have our models there's our 3 models. We have views, but the only thing under views is the web.config. We have no controllers, but notice right through here, only the web.config. That might change in a minute. Same thing up here, we have app data, app start, but no content folder. So let's go ahead and go to controllers, right mouse click, and we want to click add controller. Now a controller is just a C# class, and you might say, now wait a minute, a model is a C# class also, which is true. But a model is different because we can attach validations and annotations, and later on you're going to see that you can actually attach a model to a database table or database set. But a controller's job, being a C# class, is to manage between the model and the view. In other words, it will say, hey model, give me your data. View, here's some data, go show yourself. So that controller is where all the business logic happens. The model is where we store data. So we're making a new controller, and we want it to be an empty controller. And go ahead and click add. And the controller name itself always has something controller. Don't ever delete the word controller. Leave that there. Just change the blue highlighted part. And so we're going to start off with the default, which is home. Home controller, and click add. The home controller by default in an ASP.NET website is the first controller that's called when you run a web app. And actually in that first controller that's called, the word view says it's going to return HTML back to the browser. Index is a default method that says when the home controller is executed, index is the method that will be executed, and it will return an index view. So by default, if you ever see return view, take a look at the name of the method, and that's going to be the name of the view. Take a look at the controller, and that's going to be where the view is going to be stored. And the view is actually, like I said, what the client sees on the browser. It's HTML code. So let's go ahead and create a view. And the way we do it is we put our cursor inside of the action method. There's our action method. It's just a C# method in a class. See the class? Public class home controller inherits from the controller class. Inside of that class, we have a method whose scope is public, and it's going to return what they call an action result, and the name of the method is index, and it has no parameters being passed. When we return something, it checks what value we're returning and makes sure that it matches the value we have here. For example, if I said string, that's what I'm going to return from this method. I now have an error because that is not a string. I would have to return a string. Whoops. I would have to return just a string. So we would have to say something like hello. That string now matches what we're saying we're returning. So earlier when we said this, public action result, that means we're returning some type of view, or in other words, a group of HTML code that can be used in the client to display to the user. That's all a view is. It's HTML code that some user will display in their browser. So let's go ahead and create a brand new view, or in other words, an HTML page that the user will be able to see. But understand that ASP.NET doesn't really work with HTML pages. ASP.NET uses controllers and methods. So we're going to right mouse click inside of this action method, and we're going to choose Add View. Now in this view, we're going to go ahead and leave it the name index because that's the default view for our website. We're going to leave it empty without a model, meaning we're not going to have any data with it. We're not going to attach data to it. We're just going to display a web page or HTML, like maybe a Jumbotron or paragraphs or things like that. Make sure that this button, the Use Layout Page, is checked. We do not want the top one, Create Partial View, checked. What this button down here, this checkbox says, Use a Layout Page, it says leave this area empty if you want Razor to set a View Start file. In other words, we want ASP.NET to help us out. It's going to create a file for us called _ViewStart, and I'll show you what that does in 1 second. Click Add, and it's now scaffolding. It's using NuGet, which is what we use to install third-party libraries. And look what we have now. We have a content folder with a whole bunch of Bootstrap and some CSS. We have our home controller. I just clicked on that. We've already created that earlier, but our home controller now can work with what we call the index.cs HTML file. The content came in with all the Bootstrap, the CSS. Here's our home folder now under Views. The system created that for us. There's our index.cs HTML file. That's our view, which is going to have HTML code. And then look what else it made for us. A subfolder called Shared that has layout and another file called ViewStart. I'm going to click on _ViewStart, and it says every time you create a view in ASP.NET, you run your website and it goes out and tries to create a view for the user to see. The very first thing that happens is it executes this file, _ViewStart, and it says set the layout for the view you're bringing in to be the root directory views, which is right here, shared, which is right here, and the _layout CS HTML file, this file. And look what it has. It has a whole bunch of HTML code in it, and all of this code will be brought in for every single view we now create. And so what will now happen is when we run our website, this HTML will be brought in first to the view, and it's going to have what they call a title, and this is where you could change the title of your web page. So I could like change this title and say My Player Data, and it brings in a nav bar, and it brings in some buttons with little icon bars, and it has an application name. We could change that, and we could just call it like Player Data. And it says that if you ever click on that link, this is called an HTML helper. It's going to generate HTML for you. It generates an ahref. And so it says if you ever click on the words player _data, it will take you to the index method in the home controller, and it will pass a parameter to it called area with nothing in it. You have to say the word new, curly brace, the name of the parameter, and the value, and then it will add an HTML attribute to it through CSS. It's a new object, and you say it's going to create a CSS class called navbarBrand. So that's a way you could add like CSS into HTML to make something look different, and you'll see more of that a little bit later. And as you scroll down, you'll see something called render body, and that's where it goes out and grabs the rest of the view, like the rest of this code, and it merges it with this other HTML. And then it adds a footer to it, and adds the current date, time, now, and the year, adds another title, which we could change that title down in the footer to be My Player Data. And then notice it brings in some minified jQuery and Bootstrap. So this underscore layout is called first. And the reason it's called first is because the view start is called for every single view that you work with. And that's why it's called view start. So I'm going to go ahead and save all of that. And there's our index page. This is our very first index page that it has the word index on it, just a header 2 index. And I'm going to go ahead and click on IIS Express. And this is going to build the program and run it for us. And the first time it's a little bit slow, so just be patient. And it's going to bring it into our browser. And we'll be able to see it's running the home controller, running the index method, which says return view. So it finds the index view in the home controller, and it displays the underscore view start. There's our H2 index, and there's the footer, and that render body is smart enough that it merges everything together. And remember, if I clicked on this, it would just take us back to the home data, or the home index, which it disappears, but that's because home index is still the same. I could have come up here and typed home index, and that would have taken us to the exact same page. So I'm going to go ahead and close that browser, come back to here. So that's how we actually run a controller and tell the controller index that if you ever run home index to go find the view in the home folder for views and the index CSHTML, which first grabs view start, which says grab the layout, merge it with that file, and then display it. So let's go ahead and modify this home page. Now we're not going to worry so much about making it look pretty, but we're just going to do a little bit of work here. And let's go ahead and get rid of that H2 index, and instead let's learn how to drop an image on this page. First thing that I would do is I come over here to my content folder, I right mouse click on it, and I choose add new folder, because our content folder has all of our CSS, our images, things like that. And we're going to call the folder actually images. And then I'm going to bring up my Explorer, and I'm just going to drag and drop an image to that folder. So we now have an image in that folder, and now watch. I'm going to drag that image over to my view, and it generates the HTML code for us. Pretty nice, right? So if I save that and ran it, we'd now see an image show up in our view because it's running the home controller index method, which says return a view, and it says what's the name of our action method? Index. What controller am I in? Home. So go find the index view in the home subfolder in the view folder. Let me say that one more time. Go find the index view in the home subfolder in the views folder. And there's our image. And here is that structure over here where we have the index view in the home folder in the views folder. And once again, that's called because when we said home controller index, it says return a view. And if you don't put anything in that parentheses, it tries to find a view with the same name as the method in the same folder as the name of the controller. That's why this found the index view in the home subfolder in the views folder. Let's come back over to here and let's do a Jumbotron. So we have a little Jumbotron in here, and this will work because we already have Bootstrap brought in. Bootstrap came in when we did our underscore layout. And let's say that in this Bootstrap we want to make some action links, like a little menu. Now, we could just write the hrefs, HTML hrefs, or instead it might be nicer to let Visual Studio help us write this. So we'll go ahead and do an @HTML. That's called an HTML helper. The @ means razor, meaning I can embed C# code in my HTML. So this is going to embed a C# class called HTML, and we can say period action link, which says go create an HTML href. The first thing you specify in quotes is the text that's going to be underscored for the menu. Now in our menu, we're going to have a menu for players, a menu for positions, and a menu for teams. So let's go ahead and do each of those. So we have players, and the players will be the underscored text in the href. The next thing says, what method do you want to go to if you ever click on that link? We're going to go ahead and go to an index method. And then it says, what controller is it in? That's going to be in the players controller. And then let's do that same thing. We'll repeat it 3 times. And we're going to say positions. The controller will be the positions controller, and teams, and that will be the teams controller. Of course, we still haven't made any of these controllers. And then between each of these, let's just go ahead and do a break. So we separate it out. So let's go ahead and run this and see what happens. I'll save it. We should see the image, a jumbotron, which is going to be a gray box, and then 3 links separated. And here's our image coming up. Here's the jumbotron, and there's our 3 links. And notice as I hover over it, look down below. If you can see this down below, I'll drag it down just a little bit. As I put my cursor, I haven't clicked on it, but when I put my cursor on players, watch down here. It says go find the players controller. And it doesn't say anything else, but that's because index is the word. Positions and teams. Well, what if I said a different word there? What if I came back over here and instead of index, we had show players. And here we said show positions, spelled correctly. And here we said show teams. Let me run that one more time, and let's see what happens now when I hover over those menu systems. It now says, go to the players controller, go to the show players method. The reason it didn't show index before is because index is just the default method. And positions would now go to the show positions method in the positions controller. This link would go to the show teams in the teams controller. I'm going to right mouse click and let's do inspect. Or actually, let's just do a view page source. And I'll make this a little bit bigger for you. Take a look at these right there. That's what our HTML helper did for us. It created an ahref that says if you ever click on the word players, go to the players controller, show players method. Positions, positions controller, show positions method. Teams, teams controller, show teams. And that's how an HTML helper can help you write your HTML code. So we'll go ahead and stop this video, and the next video will actually be the Teams controller. We'll work on that. That will be part 3.